Hello guys and welcome to my ultimate tryhard guide for BF5. I did this back in BF3 and BF4 and a lot of people have been asking for an updated version on BF5, so here it is. And the point of this video is for those players who want the absolute best performance and visibility. You don't really care about graphics, you just want the most FPS, the most visibility, and you want to play competitive and tryhard all of the time. So this video will show you how to set things up. And while this is on PC, a lot of these settings you'll find on console too, so it could be relevant for you guys as well. So the first thing we want to do here is go into the options and the video settings. You want to make sure that you're playing in full screen and the resolution is the native resolution of your monitor, and if you've got a high frequency monitor, make sure that that's set correctly there. The brightness default is 50%, but I like to play on around 70, and it just makes those darker maps a bit lighter in certain areas, so it's good for spotting players who are hiding in the shadows. Field of view here, as you can see, things have changed a little bit. I've got values of 74 for infantry and vehicle, and as you can see on the right here, that actually equates to a horizontal field of view of 90, and 90 is a classic value that most competitive gamers used. I've used it since Counter-Strike, I've used it in Quake, all of the Battlefield games, and 90 gives you a nice balance of how much you can see and how close things are in front of you. So I would go with 90, play around with it. Some people prefer 80, 85, but I like to use 90. ADS field of view, you want that set to on as well, and this means that when you zoom in, it's not going to make your field of view narrower, it's going to give you the same field of view. So when you zoom in, you're still going to have a horizontal field of view of 90. Some prefer it off, I like to keep it on just for consistency. Motion blur, 0%, turn that all the way off. I do not like motion blur. Depth of field effects, again, when you aim down the sight, you don't really want any processing done then, and that's going to blur your gun and blur certain things, so turn that off. Custom color settings, that's all the colorblind stuff. I'm not colorblind, so I don't mess with this, but some people like the way it looks, so experiment if you want to check it out, but I don't really use that. And you can change the colors of enemies and friendlies here. I'll just leave that all at default, and all these are set to on by default, and you want to make sure that these are all turned off. They're just cinematic effects that really make your game look more cinematic and pretty, but they're not great for visibility and performance, so just turn those off. Now then, in the advanced video tab, plenty of stuff in here. The top one, DX12 enabled. Now, this really depends on your particular PC setup. Some people get better performance with it on, some people get better performance with it off. With the latest Nvidia drivers, I get better performance with DX12 enabled, so I've turned it on, but please experiment with this and see what works best for you. HDR, high dynamic range, is turned off. Obviously, if you've got an HDR monitor and you want to turn it on, then turn it on, but yeah, I just leave it off. Resolution scale, if you want more frames per second, you can change this all the way down to 25%, but the game is going to look quite bad because it's rendering it at a lower resolution, so I would just leave that at 100%. Frame rate limiter, I have that on 200. You can change it to your refresh rate if you want, or set like 120, 144, but I just leave it at 200. Future frame rendering, this one's an interesting one. Basically, if you want more performance, set it to on. But if you've already got a sick PC and you're getting a load of frames, turn it off, because that means that you're going to get less input lag on your mouse and it's going to feel more responsive, and you can notice the difference. Some people are more perceptive to input lag than others, but I can notice the difference between it off and on. I do lose a few frames per second, but with it off, my mouse just feels so much better. So again, experiment with that. You'll get more frame rate if you turn it on, but if you've already got ridiculously good frames, then turn it off and you'll get a better feeling on your mouse. Vertical sync, turn that off. UI upscaling, set that to auto, and GPU memory restriction is off. So leave that at default, and graphics quality, go across until it says custom, and then you can start changing all of these settings. So as you can see, I've got everything set to low apart from mesh quality, which is set to ultra, and that will help you see people at extreme long ranges, so it's very useful if you're flying in planes or bombers and you want to see infantry on the ground. Everything else on low. Unfortunately, by default, you can't turn off anti-aliasing. There is apparently a config out there that will let you turn that off, but for the purpose of keeping it simple, let's set that to low, and ambient occlusion set to off. So with those video settings, this is how the game looks. It's very clean, and you're going to get great frames per second, and it just looks nice. It's not too bright, not too dark. You can quickly locate enemies like this and your mouse is going to feel great. Next, we're going to go into the audio settings. Master volume 100%, music volume. The soundtrack to this game is incredible, but if you're being a super sweaty tryhard, put that to 0 so you won't have any music blaring in your ears at the end of the rounds when you need to go super tryhard clutch mode. Output configuration, auto. Sound preset, change this to 3D headphones. Most people will use speakers or headphones. Trust me, 3D headphones, really great for hearing footsteps and enemies around you. It's a new technology that they've put into the game. I think it's called HRTF or something, but they've called it 3D headphones here and it works fantastic. Announcer language, English, but I turn the in-game announcer off. Again, I don't want any more sounds interfering. Voice over IP, I turn that off. Unfortunately, I don't really play with random squad mates that much. I'm using Discord and TeamSpeak for my voiceover. But if you are using voice over IP, I would turn game volume reduction off too, because then the game audio isn't going to be changing when people are speaking over the top of you. So if you have that off, you're not going to miss any enemy footsteps if your squad mates are rambling onto you. Okay, go back and into the gameplay options. Now there's a few things in here. Obviously, if you want the HUD on, you want to show that. HUD motion, that's on by default, and that has your HUD like moving around everywhere while you're sprinting and running. So I don't like that, I turn it off. Player created content, that's like emblems and stuff, that's your opinion, your choice, do you want to see that or not. Chat log, I have it hidden. Magnify chat off, inventory when active. Crosshair visibility 100%, I like to see my crosshair and that's the default colour of it. I use white because that's what I'm used to, but you know, it's subjective, it's your choice. Now the kill log is off by default, so if you want that on, click show. And you can also change the filter here. I have it set to nearby and I like it to show me the icon and the name. Now nearby is a good setting because you're only getting the information that's relevant to you. However, if you wanted to see all of the kills in the kill feed, the kill log, change it to all. And this can be useful, for example, if you see a V1 rocket going and it's not landing nearby you and it's getting a load of kills on a certain point, then you're not going to know that that's happened. So set that to all if you want, but I like to leave it on nearby so it's just relevant to what's around me. Score log, weapon name, I turn that off. I don't really need to see the name of the gun on there. And I hide the awards as well. They look pretty, but they can really get in the way sometimes, so that's all gone. Vehicle seat info show, critical messages show, share usage data off or on, doesn't really matter to me, but some people don't like the data of their computer components being sent to EA, but I know that EA and DICE do use that to figure out what went wrong if you have like a crash or something goes wrong with the server, but whatever, I leave that on. And the shadow strength, put that to 100% and it will just help visibility of certain icons on the HUD. Hit indicator colors, so visibility 100%, I want to see my hit indicators. Hit color, white, that's my default. If I get a headshot, it's red, so I know I've done a lot of damage. If I get a kill, it's green, green to go, and then I can move on to the next target. And I like damage based shape as well, so I can see quickly how much damage my shot has done instead of having to read the number. And then of course, if you're hitting armor, you can have a different color there too. Minimap, although they've changed a lot of stuff in this game with the minimap, you can still get a lot of information from it. So texture opacity is at 100. Rotate with view, I'll leave that on. And then you can change the different zoom radiuses. I've kind of left these at default apart from the on foot one. I think I've put that to 100, and I've also increased the minimap size to 125% just so I can quickly look down there and see if anyone's nearby and get an accurate idea of where exactly they are. And then I've got all stationary weapons shown on the minimap. And then here, these can be quite important because sometimes the icons can get in the way of things that you're looking at in game when you're aiming, but by default the values are okay. I've just tweaked them a little bit here, so if you want to go ahead and copy those settings and then see how you feel about it. Obviously stuff like friendly soldiers, you need to see that, but maybe not so much. Objectives, they're massive, you can see them, so I turn that down. Enemy soldier opacity, full 100% when you're aiming down the sight, and just standard. And gadgets, really, I don't often have to use those, so put that on 50%, and when you're aiming 10% because you don't want that stuff getting in the way. In the advanced gameplay settings, I've got soldier auto leaning and peeking set to on. As far as I know, there isn't a dedicated button for those, so if you have them off then you can't use those features, so leave those on. Parachute auto deploy, I set that to off because I just like to choose when I'm popping my chute. It can be a bit risky, but if you're on the ball It's going to give you a bit more freedom when dropping out of planes and stuff like that. And these are all default, I think, apart from the hint system, which I've turned off. Usually it's on by default and it comes up here in a big box, but if you know how to play the game, then turn that off. That will give you some indication of network performance, but it makes a big thing here that can get in the way. And aim lead indicator, really you only need to have that on the screen if you've got terrible ping, so just turn that off and try to play on servers that are in your own region. Going back, we're going to look at controls, and again a few things in here that I've tweaked around with. So mouse sensitivity, this is up to you really. There is no correct answer for mouse sensitivity, and also for the analog stick if you're playing on controller. I use a Razer Death Adder with 400 DPI and a sensitivity of 15, which is kind of on the low side. Now, I typically used 13% in previous Battlefield games, but BF5 is so fast paced and the time to kill is so quick that I've gone with a slightly higher sensitivity. So I'm using 15% for my mouse sens, and I think these are all default apart from weapon zoom. I like to use toggle, some people like to use hold, that's just your preference. And don't forget down here as well that you can change your vehicle aiming sensitivity to, and again I've put that to 15% and on toggle instead of hold, and I use inverted flight. In the advanced controls, there is a bunch of stuff that you can mess around with in here. So some for controllers, most for mouse, but uniform soldier aiming, I have that turned on. And in layman's terms, what it means is that when you aim down the sight, no matter what scope you're using, what zoom you're using, your mouse sensitivity will be the same as when you're just hip firing. And this is really good in my opinion for muscle memory. So if you're aiming down the sight, and if you're hip firing, it's always going to be a consistent sensitivity. By default, that is set to off as far as I know. And some people actually like it to slow down when you zoom in. So there's a lot of preference there, but for me personally, I like the sensitivity to stay the same when I'm zooming in, no matter what scope or weapon or zoom that I'm using. And the coefficient is default at 133%. So you can tweak around with that if you like, but I just leave that at default. I'll leave these at default as well, and all of the zoom sensitivities here, but can we just appreciate that this is possible? In a PC port, you don't often get this kind of configurability. Is that a real word? Whatever, I'm going to go with it. So you can individually change all of the different zoom sensitivities if you want. So that's all there for you, but I just leave it at 100%. And you can also change things in the vehicles too, for the tanks, the planes, the turrets. Very cool. There's a ton of options here for the player, so mess around with it, but those are the settings that I like to use there. And finally, in controller tuning, just make sure that raw mouse input is set to on there, and there's a load more gamepad optimization things in there too, but I don't really play with the gamepad on PC, so I don't mess with that, but I'm sure some of this is really useful for the console guys. As for key bindings, I don't use any special key bindings really. It's all default apart from in Pilot, where I use pitch up as spacebar. So that means that instead of having to drag my mouse down if I want to do like a really quick turn, dragging it down again and again and again, you can just hold the spacebar and it's dead simple, and you can get the best turning speed. So that's really good if someone's chasing you or if you're chasing down an enemy pilot. So hot tip right there. And as for the basic options in the game, I think that's about it really, and try those settings out for yourself, see how you feel. A lot of this is your preference, but that's how I have it set up if I want to go super duper try hard, and for the most part I think that's a pretty good setup. And if you're interested in using the config file to disable anti-aliasing, I'll link that down in the description below. So there it is guys, I hope you enjoyed that and found it informative. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up down below and a comment, maybe a share as well. If you didn't like it, dislike it, not a problem. If you want to see more Battlefield content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.